the Packers defense and the offense. So we've had a lot of conversation across ESPN Wisconsin and a little bit on this show about which group is more championship ready. In my eyes, it is the defense. But the offense isn't far off either. Now, we know the big needs, right? Wide receiver, edge rusher, likely cornerback, assuming the Packers make the decision to move on from Jair Alexander. It's incredibly unlikely he's back, right? Like, I heard Brad Nortman on KBN earlier this week try to make a case for Jair being back in Green Bay on a team-friendly deal and kind of a prove-it year for him. But given the contract they're in, it just makes more sense to get out post-June 1st. Now, you can designate that. That's what the Jets are doing with Aaron Rodgers, as Will mentioned. He will technically be a free agent, but it will also technically be with the Jets until June 1st. Now, if you are designated as a post-June 1st cut, for example, this is what the Packers did with Aaron Jones last year. It was March 12th or 13th, whatever day free agency opened. They signed Josh Jacobs, and then they designate Aaron Jones as a post-June 1st cut, which saves them some money. And Aaron Jones able that week then to go sign with the Minnesota Vikings, participate in the offseason program prior to June 1st and all that. So you can designate that just to save yourself some money. It's one of those tricks that you can do to balance the cap a little bit better. Now, anyway, it would make more sense for the Packers to move on from Jair Alexander post-June 1st. I think it would save them an additional $8 million. Now, the problem there is you're not able to spend that $8 million until after June 1st. So corner, edge rush, wide receiver, right? Those feel like the big issues right now. You've obviously got a hole, likely if Josh Myers is to leave, at center that maybe you fill with guys you already have on the roster, but you're going to need to add some depth then through free agency. So the question for me then is, right, what parts worry you most? Because it feels like this defense, who had a big recovery this year, was way better against the run. It seems like that linebacker crew, for as young as they are, has some superstardom potential. The safety group is the best it's been in what feels like forever. So you've got good pieces on each side of the ball. How far away are each group, though? Right, when you look at the defense, they did make a nice improvement. But if you want to be Super Bowl good, you need to continue that development, right? They are viewed as a top 10 defense. You think of, well, again, like I just mentioned, great against the run this year. I think they only allowed 3 100-yard rushers. One of them was Saquon in the opener. One of them was Jonathan Taylor in the home opener, which was week 2. I mean, you did really well against the run all year. And that's something that needs to continue into next year. Something you did not do so well with is the pass rush, getting after the opposing quarterbacks. While the sack numbers might look a little inflated because against Tennessee, they just got to Will Levis a million times. There was one other game where I think they had 7 or 8 sacks. But outside of those, struggled to get after the quarterback. Think about Jalen Hurts in the wild card game. Think about Sam Darnold in that Minnesota game towards the end of the year. You just didn't really get after the quarterback that well. That's something that's got to change. And whether that's through trade or free agency or draft or all of the above, you have to fix that. And if you do, you're that much closer to being a championship defense. The quarterback situation is the one I just can't figure out, man. Like, I'm really struggling to figure out how they're going to address that one. Because, as I mentioned, the odds are you're moving on from Jair Alexander, which leaves you with Carrington Valentine and Keyshawn Nixon as kind of your top 2 corners. And while that's not awful, you certainly don't want those to be your top 2 guys. Like, if they are 2 and 3, you feel much better about it. So is that you go get a DJ Reed or somebody, a nice name in free agency? Do you draft a corner in round 1 and hope they develop very quickly into a top corner? I don't know. That's the one where I can't peg down what the right move is. And by the way, I don't think just one corner is enough to go, okay, now they're championship level, right? Like, I don't view that as the case. Now, if you invest in free agency and you draft one early, all of a sudden, okay, you've got 2 new guys in the room alongside Valentine, no pun intended, and Nixon. You feel a little bit better about that group of 4. We did the percentage game on Wednesday's show where we named a Packer or a possible Packer, and I gave a percentage as to how likely I think it is that they're back in Green Bay. Eric Stokes I put high. I brought that up with Jason Wilde yesterday on Weekly Wilde, which you can find in the Mr. Relevant podcast feed as well as at ESPN Milwaukee on YouTube. He thinks it's more of a situation where a change of scenery is necessary for the player. That's not to say the Packers wouldn't offer him an opportunity to come back, as he is an unrestricted free agent. But he thinks, this could be a move where he needs to go to a Denver or an Atlanta or a Carolina, right? Wherever, Miami, and just go fight for a job. Because the change of scenery is necessary for a guy who just didn't live up to the hype as a first-round pick in Green Bay, which is fair, but I still do think, number one, I don't think the market's going to be huge for him. I just don't. Like, he's a depth corner. He hasn't progressed. He hasn't become he looks nothing like a first-round pick. But as Tausch always says, I'm Wilde and Tausch, seventh-round picks always have to prove they belong in the NFL. First-round picks always have to prove they don't belong in the NFL in order to lose their job. So he is one where maybe he has a small market, but I think it's likely he's back. So then that's your depth piece, and then hopefully, he can become your fourth or fifth corner on a one-year deal, and then maybe he goes elsewhere. But we will see there. Corner is the position that might scare me the most in terms of how the Packers handle that this offseason, because it feels like we are trending in a direction, at least a wide receiver, where the public pressure is on, right? It seems like all the fans want a number one receiver. I don't think it's going to be T. Higgins. I don't think it's Deebo Samuel. I don't think it's Cooper Kupp. Devontae Adams, very possible if Goody is open to that idea. Otherwise, is it a draft pick in the second or third round? I don't know that we want to run that one back. So wide receiver obviously has its worries. Edge obviously has its worries. But I think as I continue to overthink this, because it's all I think about because I'm a dork, corner is the position I'm worried about most, how the Packers handle it this offseason. Hunter, go ahead.
I mean, I just keep going back to, and I know I've brought it up a couple of times on this show, like, pass rushers will make the corners look better. And I just feel like because of how bad the pass rush was, you have to try and figure out a way to fix that. Because I just don't think the idea of, if you upgrade at the cornerback position and you get more consistency out of that, then you just know the quarterback's going to be hanging on to the ball longer. Like, I don't think that's a guarantee in today's NFL, whereas you get pass rushers, whether it's edge or interior pass rush, you force the quarterback to have to get rid of the ball sooner, and then that makes the corners, I think, look better. So I feel like it's got to be the pass rush. Like, you fix that entire defense suddenly looks a million times better.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree, right? If you were to bring in a Myles Garrett or something, it's going to make everything else on that defense look better. It just is. But how realistic is it the Packers are to acquire a top 5 edge rusher this offseason? Now, there's plenty of names being floated, and we talked about those a ton on Wednesday. If you missed that segment, you can find it on the ESPN Milwaukee and ESPN Madison YouTube channels, where we went through and kind of hashed through the percentage. And we talked about Trey Hendrickson and Max Crosby and Myles Garrett and the actual potential of them being on the Packers roster. It doesn't feel to me like, I mean, this is no breaking news. The last trade the Packers actually acquired a player of significance was Brett Favre. And that was before I was born, right? I mean, that was the early 90s. So it just doesn't, they just don't do that. That's not their MO. That's just not something they often do. So that's the thing where, would it be nice to acquire a Max Crosby or Myles Garrett? Obviously. I think it would take this defense to a totally different level. It's just something they don't do. And I worry that will again be the case this offseason at that position. So now to Hunter's question, do you want to run back the idea of, drafting a defensive end and hoping they develop into something special in year one? I'm willing to try it. I just don't have a lot of faith in it. I mean, you drafted Lucas Van Ness now 2 years ago with the 13th overall pick. And how's that worked out for you? So, yes, I agree. DN/edge is probably the position of most necessary upgrade. But to go get a proven top 5 edge rusher in the NFL, despite the fact it's very possible this offseason, with 3 of them legitimately saying, I want out one way or another. Trey Hendrickson not necessarily saying, I want to trade, but he said, I need a contract extension. And whether that's in Cincinnati or not, I don't really care. And Crosby and Garrett both pretty darn open about the fact they want out of their respective teams in Cleveland and Las Vegas. So we will see. Chef Ed chiming in with an attempt at a poem. Let me know how this is. Roses are red. The Lions wear blue. If the Packers get Garrett, Detroit's knee deep in the pool. Oh, in the poo, excuse me. Knee deep in the poo.